Right now, a headline is spreading fast and making a lot of people stop scrolling. It mentions February 2026 and a possible $2,000 check. The claim says this money would not be a handout, not borrowed, and not created by printing new money. Instead, it would come from money Americans may have already paid without realizing it. That raises an important question. If this idea is real, where would the money actually come from? And if it is not real, why are so many people talking about it like it is already guaranteed? This story is not just about a check. It is about how fast financial rumors can turn into expectations. That can be risky, especially for people who do not have much room for error. Before deciding whether this is something to prepare for or something to ignore, it helps to understand what is actually being proposed, what is still missing, and what has not been explained clearly yet. Getting this wrong does not just lead to disappointment. It can quietly influence the financial decisions people make for months or even years. The timing is a big reason this story feels so powerful. Prices are still high. Savings do not stretch as far as they used to. For people living on fixed incomes, even the idea of an extra $2,000 feels like relief. When a specific dollar amount is tied to a specific month, it starts to feel real. It stops sounding like a rumor and starts sounding like a plan. That is where things can become dangerous. Over time, people have seen how quickly talk online turns into certainty. A few confident voices repeat the same claim. Headlines get shorter. Details get removed. Soon, people start planning around something that does not officially exist yet. That is why this conversation matters. Not to create false hope and not to shut the idea down, but to slow things down and replace noise with clarity. This idea keeps coming back because it is connected to something real. Tariffs. Tariffs are not abstract ideas. They show up in everyday prices. When people hear that tariffs may have generated large amounts of money, one question naturally follows. If that money came from consumers, should some of it come back to them? That logic feels fair. It feels reasonable. That is why many people are taking this idea seriously, even though the details are still unclear. But an idea can sound reasonable and still never turn into reality. It can make sense and still fall apart once the details are examined closely. Before this becomes another cycle of expectation followed by frustration, it helps to separate what has been talked about from what has actually been approved. It also matters because some people may be putting off important financial decisions today while waiting for something that might happen tomorrow. To understand where the $2,000 idea comes from, it helps to understand tariffs in plain language. A tariff is a tax placed on goods brought into the United States from other countries. When companies import products from places like China, Mexico, or Europe, the government charges them a fee. Here is the part that is often missed. Companies do not absorb this cost. They pass it along to consumers. That means when you buy appliances, clothes, electronics, tools, or certain foods, part of the price includes tariff costs. You do not see it listed on the receipt, but you still pay it. Over several years, those tariffs have added up to billions of dollars flowing into government accounts. Supporters of tariffs say they protect American jobs by making foreign goods more expensive. But many Americans have mainly felt higher prices and tighter budgets. This is where the refund idea enters the discussion. The basic argument is simple. If consumers paid higher prices because of tariffs, and those tariffs created large amounts of revenue, then returning some of that money could be seen as giving people back what they already paid. Not a stimulus, not borrowed money, just money that was already collected. When framed this way, it feels more like a refund than a giveaway. That distinction matters to people. The $2,000 figure comes from estimates about how much money could be distributed if a portion of tariff revenue were returned to the public. February 2026 gets mentioned because it would allow time for calculations, debate, and implementation if the idea were ever turned into law. And that word matters. If. Right now, there is no signed law. There is no passed bill. There is no approved program. What exists is a proposal being discussed in political and economic circles. For it to become real, it would have to move through Congress and be signed by the President. Anyone who has watched how Congress operates knows how difficult that process can be. Even if the idea sounds fair, there are hard questions that still need answers. One of the biggest is where that money is currently going. Tariff revenue does not sit unused. It is already part of the federal budget. Sending it back out would mean cutting spending elsewhere, increasing deficits, or limiting who qualifies. These are the moments where many ideas slow down. There are also major questions that remain unanswered. Who would qualify? Would it go to every adult or only taxpayers? Would there be income limits? Would it be based on recent tax returns or older ones? These details determine who actually receives money, and right now, none of them are set. Then there is the issue of logistics. Would payments be mailed or sent by direct deposit? Would people who do not regularly file taxes need to take action? Past experience shows that new payment systems often come with delays, errors, and confusion. There is also a separate debate happening behind the scenes. Some critics argue that if tariffs are producing so much extra money, maybe the tariffs themselves are too high. Instead of collecting higher prices and issuing a one-time refund, lowering tariffs could reduce costs long-term. Those two approaches lead to very different outcomes, and they do not easily exist together. For people receiving Social Security, this conversation becomes even more personal. Any refund like this would likely be separate from monthly benefits, which means regular checks would not automatically change. But depending on how a future law is written, the payment could still count as taxable income. That matters for people who carefully manage their income to avoid crossing certain thresholds. An extra $2,000 showing up on a tax return could affect things like Medicare premiums or other income-based calculations. Right now, there is no way to know how it would be classified, because no rules have been written yet. Anyone claiming certainty at this stage is guessing. This is often where expectations start to quietly drift. When people hear about a possible future payment, they begin assigning it a purpose: paying off debt, catching up on bills, fixing something they have delayed. That reaction is natural, especially for people on fixed incomes. But the moment people start relying on money that does not exist yet, the focus shifts from planning to waiting. And waiting changes behavior in ways that are easy to miss at first. At this point, it's important to slow things down, because even though a lot of people are talking about a $2,000 tariff refund check like it's guaranteed, there is no approved program right now. Congress has not passed a law for this. No checks have been authorized, and there is no official payment scheduled. The idea of a $2,000 tariff refund mostly comes from public comments made by President Donald Trump and a few lawmakers. They've talked about using money collected from tariffs and returning some of it to Americans as a kind of rebate or dividend. But talking about an idea and turning it into law are two very different things. Right now, economic experts who have looked at the numbers say something important. The amount of money collected from tariffs is not enough to send $2,000 to everyone without major changes. Paying checks that large would cost hundreds of billions of dollars depending on who qualifies. Tariffs do bring in money. The federal government collects billions of dollars a year from them. But even at higher levels, tariff revenue is still far below what would be needed to send $2,000 payments to tens of millions of people. That's a key detail that often gets left out of headlines. Another important fact is this: the president cannot send out checks on his own. Any plan like this would have to be approved by Congress. That means the House would need to pass it, the Senate would need to agree, and then it would need to be signed into law. So far, that has not happened. There is no final bill. There is no signed legislation, and there is no official rollout plan. Some lawmakers have talked about smaller rebate ideas funded by tariff revenue, but even those proposals have not passed. Nothing has become law. That's why fact-checking groups and financial experts keep saying the same thing. Right now, this is a proposal, not a program. Another issue that gets overlooked is how the money is currently used. Tariff revenue does not sit in a separate account waiting to be returned. It goes into the federal budget and helps pay for existing government expenses. So if a large portion of that money were sent back out as checks, something else would need to change. Either spending would be cut somewhere else, the deficit would grow, or eligibility would be limited. This is where many ideas start to slow down. There are also legal questions involved. Some tariffs have been imposed using emergency powers, and parts of those policies are still being reviewed in court. If courts change how those tariffs are handled, that could affect how much money is actually available. And then there are the details that no one can answer yet because no law exists. Who would qualify for a refund? Would it go to every adult or only taxpayers? Would there be income limits? Would married couples get one check or two? Would it be based on recent tax returns? Right now, there are no official answers. There's also the issue of distribution. If something like this were ever approved, how would the money be sent? By mail? By direct deposit? Would people who don't regularly file taxes need to take action? Past government payments show that new systems often come with delays, errors, and confusion, even when programs are approved. Because of all this, government agencies and consumer advocates have been warning people to be careful. There is no application process right now. Anyone claiming you can sign up or claim your $2,000 check today is not being truthful. Another part of this conversation is happening quietly in the background. Some economists argue that if tariffs are creating excess revenue, a better solution might be lowering tariffs so prices go down permanently, instead of collecting higher prices and then issuing a one-time refund. That debate matters because those two approaches lead to very different outcomes. And right now, neither path has been finalized. It's also important to understand that tariffs make up only a small portion of the government's total revenue, compared to income taxes and payroll taxes. Tariff income can also change from year to year, depending on trade and the economy. So when people hear about a possible $2,000 check, it's understandable that it sounds appealing. But the facts show that the idea is still unfinished. No rules, no timeline, no guarantee. At this stage, what exists is discussion, not delivery, and that's why it matters to separate what is being talked about from what is actually happening. Because when expectations start forming before a program exists, that's when people begin making decisions based on assumptions instead of facts. And that's where the risk quietly begins to grow. So here's where everything stands right now. The idea of a $2,000 tariff refund check is being talked about, but it is not approved, not funded, and not scheduled. There is no law in place. There is no official program. And there is no guarantee that any payment will ever happen. That does not mean the idea is impossible. It means it is unfinished. And unfinished ideas should never be treated like money already in your pocket. If something like this ever becomes real, it would likely come with rules, limits, and conditions that no one can fully explain yet. Who qualifies? How it's paid? Whether it's taxable? All of that would depend on legislation that does not exist today. That's why the most important thing right now is not guessing what might happen in February 2026, but staying grounded in what is real today. Your bills are real today. Your income is real today. Your financial decisions matter today. Waiting for a possible future payment can quietly put people in a holding pattern. Debt gets delayed. Savings get postponed. Important choices get pushed aside because help is assumed to be coming. And that's where financial stress tends to grow, not shrink. The healthiest mindset is simple. If a payment ever comes, it helps. If it doesn't, you're still okay. That mindset keeps you in control. Stay informed, but don't let headlines run your finances. Pay attention, but don't plan your future around speculation. Use facts, not rumors, to guide your decisions. Because real financial stability doesn't come from one-time checks or political promises. It comes from steady choices, clear thinking, and preparing for what you can control. And when you do that, no headline has the power to shake you.